Welcome in, everybody, to 19 on the Clock, your Tri-State high school and college sports podcast. I'm your host, Brad Pushkar. Joining me is my co-host, Jackson McCarty. Jackson, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, and we've got another great lineup of high school and college football coming up. Getting deep into the playoffs, especially for Indiana, getting deeper for Ohio. Kentucky still's got a little bit of ways to go, but we'll take a look at all of that, and we're into the final 2 weeks of college football.
Yeah, it's a nervous time for fans across the country.
Well, and that's the thing is that next week is going to be rivalry week, but this week arguably has some games that almost have a little bit more importance than some rivalries historically have.
Oh yeah, well that penultimate week is your real last, like you said, you're not really focusing on the sentimentality of it. You're just focused on getting some of those big games out of the way. Yes. Now, I know we're not starting with college football. Ohio State did not think this week was supposed to be a super big game for them, and that'll come across the desk here in a minute.
I don't think a lot of people thought that this game was going to be as important as it was. I think most people thought next week was going to be more important than this week, but I think it's more exciting than this week is.
And there's still a lot of people doubting how important this game is for some reason. But
we will get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Let's start with some high school football.
A game that you cannot doubt the importance of, historically, currently, any timeline you want to pick, Moeller and St. X.
Rivalry week this week for those two.
Yes, and it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I want to rewind you guys to week 5 earlier this year. We had the Moeller St. X game, as we do in the GCL South. Moeller came out on top. Final score there was 45-37. Now, St. X, they have had a real streak of close games, and they've gone on a little bit of a revenge tour here recently. I want to walk you through what their playoffs have looked like lately. Beat Lakota West 16-13 last week. Lakota West, one of the very best teams in the state. I don't think you can have very many questions about that. And just overall, it's been kind of a weird ordeal for their offense, but they're finding success regardless. You've got Chase Herbstreit. Last week he had about 120 all-purpose yards. Daniel Vollmer had about 110. But really the focus of this game for me, and like you heard Joe Danman say it on this podcast last week, Moeller is the Goliath of the situation. They are the team that you have to worry about, not just in regionals, but when we get past, and you've heard me say it on here half a dozen times, so we've only had this podcast running for 4 weeks. But St. X has that pure underdog mentality, even though they've had a phenomenal season. And on paper, they're not really underdogs at anything, because every game that they've had, it's been close if they lose it. So that pure rivalry aspect, the importance of where we're at now, the talent on both sides, that close loss earlier in the year, you cannot draw up a game much better than we've got right here.
Let me ask you this. Obviously we've talked about Moeller almost to death.
Ad nauseum, yeah.
And Joe, I know, said last week when he was talking with you how they are the team to beat at this point.
Yes.
Not even just necessarily in the division, but in the state of Ohio. So for St. X, this feels like it is almost the state championship game where you get through this. You may play another tough team, but this is the team to beat. This
is almost guaranteed the hardest game you'll play all year.
Yes.
You might not have as much inherent pressure. Like when you get to that state title game and you're playing in Columbus and you're, all of that emotion, that is going to be hard to top. But if you're ever going to have a chance, it's against your crosstown rival who beat you earlier this year. It's this, like you said, this is very much the game that obviously you have to sweat it out because it's playoffs, but there's a lot of extra weight on this.
And looking back at last week playing Lakota West, being able to win after losing early in the season, Lakota West was another arguably top team.
Yeah.
For Moeller now, is this a near final test of you got to get through this, and then or is there still chances of teams from Columbus, Cleveland area that they could meet later on?
I think the term trap game is relatively disrespectful.
Okay.
So I'm not going to use that in this instance. But I do think Moeller has their eyes on that state title, and despite the significance of this game, and despite how talented St. X is, I think Moeller has gotten comfortable knowing that the only team that's been able to put a dent in them is from 1,000 miles east, out in North Carolina in an overtime game.
Yes.
I think that there's a lot of comfort that comes with that. I think Matt Ponatoski, the season he's having, Christian Harris, just a whole litany of super impressive guys. I don't know necessarily that this game means any more to them than any other playoff game does, and I know that's like coach speak more often than it's not, but I do kind of believe that in this situation, because this is supposed to just be another week that they advance forward. They are not supposed to go out here. St. X, though, that just means that they have way more cushion, because I don't think a lot of people are expecting them to win this. So I don't really know how the advantage swings in that, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if I'd rather be the team that's expected to push forward and has all this stuff on paper that shows, hey, this is a really good football team, or the team that's just going out there and saying, we don't like this team, when we play them and we get the chance to continue our season if we beat them. Double sweep, not a whole lot of pressure here. But what I do know is that I'm really looking forward to this.
Yes, this seems like this is just one of those matchups that you always want to see happen. This is like the point of playoffs in a way.
Exactly. If you can, at the beginning of the year, if you can pick who's meeting in the regional finals and the regional semis and things like that, this is almost always going to be your regional finals game.
Yeah.
Just on selection.
Yeah.
You might have a Princeton versus Moeller. You might have, an Anderson popping in or here or there or wherever. But more often than not, this is where you're going to land.
Yeah. Maybe it depends on how the bracket shakes out. But,
right.
Obviously, it shook out in a way to get a good matchup like this. So,
yeah.
Let's talk about you mentioned some names from Moeller. Obviously, Ponatoski's been the guy this year. Where else is he going to get help, either both on offense or on defense, keeping St. X?
So I wrote down a proverbial laundry list of names that I wanted to make sure to mention on this podcast, because while that love traditionally is going to go to a quarterback, there is so much more at play here that needs to be mentioned. So we've got running back Tyler Joslin. He had his first 100-yard game last week. His highest on the season prior to that, 99 yards against St. X. Yeah. So coming off of his best game, his second best game was against the team he's about to play. That mentality and that morale is going to be high there. You've got a pair of receivers, Matt Fogler, Jovan Love. Both have incredible years so far. I've mentioned Christian Harris. Roman Mason had 2 interceptions last week against Princeton. He's got 5 in the playoffs. It went 2-1-2. That's how his weeks have gone so far. So if there's a guy to watch on defense, I've mentioned Christian Harris a couple times, but Roman Mason would be the spotlight here. And then Chris Bradley, 2 picks against Lakota East 2 weeks ago. So, they're ball hawks. And with Herbstreit, who has had a little bit of that turnover issue and usually tends to lean on his legs a little bit more, especially as the game goes on, if that ball needs to be up in the air, if they're down, you've got a handful of guys that you do not want to throw it in the direction of.
Yeah, the nice thing about, I don't always go out to these high school games.
Yeah.
But the thing that I love about making this podcast is I get to watch all the highlights when we put it together at the end of the day. So getting to watch him throw some of those deep bombs, just leading the receiver perfectly, I think is beautiful. I think obviously that feels like that's something that he's going to want, is to get the receiver to break out ahead of these guys.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have the chance of getting picked off.
Right. We heard Joe D last week preach efficiency, but that does not mean that he is not capable of creating those massive plays. It's not a Jimmy Garoppolo situation. It is just a guy who knows how to do everything. He just happens to excel at being really efficient.
Any other hidden... I guess here's my question for you. What is going to make this game different than the regular season game when they matched up?
The tension. I mean, obviously you have that natural, but it never matters more than now. And you really don't even need any more gasoline to put on that fire, so to speak, because your season ends if you lose.
Yeah. As much as a rivalry matters and you want to win those rivalry games, at least you play the next week when it's the regular season.
Exactly. Yeah. The Moeller game, while I would imagine it sucked a tremendous amount for St. X to have to come back to school on Monday with that loss hanging over their shoulder. Mm-hmm. Like you said, the season lived on, and they've had 8 games since then. That doesn't continue if you go 2 in a row here. So, make sure to tune in. We will obviously have highlights for that one on Final Quarter. We might have 4 people out there just to have fun with it. But, so definitely keep eyes on that.
Great. And So that is, kind of, I would argue, say Ohio game of the week.
Yeah. Just by that much.
But let's talk about another very strong team playing another very scrappy team.
Yes.
That is looking to make a run towards the state championship. LaSalle playing Anderson, both coming off of huge wins last week.
So in our notes that I pushed out, they both have "wow" next to them because of the final score. So LaSalle.
He makes it easy for me to understand.
I break it down. But Anderson beat Mount Healthy. I preached about that quarterback battle that we were going to get from Jameer Spain and Justice Burnham. Anderson won 42-0. Not much of a battle there.
No.
Shout out Jameer Spain for the incredible season he had, but that offense did get blanked last week because the Raptors are freaks. On the other side of stuff, LaSalle going up against Harrison, so two SWAC teams, on either side of that, they blanked Harrison 37-0. With a running back that I would consider the best at bare minimum in this region, Cole Coops.
Yes.
Absolute stud. And did not get in the end zone once. Dickie Engle, too, their quarterback, he's been good. He's been a good quarterback. Still couldn't get in the end zone. So the Lancers, I would say that I kind of sold on them by the midpoint of the season. Mm-hmm. I didn't really have that much confidence in them, just being perfectly honest. It's fully restored at this point off the back of that defense. But how much has defense really mattered when you've gone up against Anderson, all this year? You go through their score lines, and it looks like they're playing basketball and the other team's playing soccer. You know what I mean? It's horrifying to look at sometimes.
Basketball on grass.
Yeah, literally.
That's what I play. So let's talk about your guys to watch for both sides here.
Yep.
Any names that people want to be picking up on when they're out on the field?
Yeah, Justice Burnham is a perennial guy to watch, the quarterback for Anderson. I've got some numbers here. Actually, last week, it was his first game this year with under 100 passing yards.
Wow.
Because the running back, Darrell Turner, listen, this stat line is absurd. 263 yards, 4 touchdowns, 22 carries.
Jeez.
Yeah, you don't need to pass when your back's doing that. I'm not real worried about the down week for Justice Burnham. He's still going to be phenomenal if they have to lean into it. But that running game really came alive. You also have receiver Trace Jalek. He's over 1,600 on the year. Pretty solid there. And then Jayon Saunders had a pick last week, 4 interceptions this year. It's not quite that 5-pick postseason that we talked about earlier. Still very capable of making a play on the ball and causing some headaches there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then just quickly on the other side, the 3 main guys I wanted to highlight for LaSalle: Pat McLaughlin, obviously the coach's son and quarterback, really, really talented dual threat guy. You've got receiver Max Welter, and then you've got DL Fergus Kreider.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like I said, LaSalle, the strength and why I've started to have some renewed faith for them is on the back of their defense, and a lot of times that is not coming from 1 or 2 specific guys. It will be, this guy had a really good week, or this linebacker stepped up, or it's never really coming from that same spot.
So let me ask you this: what is to me, Anderson has been kind of like a Moeller, a team to beat, a team that is very dominant. What is LaSalle going to need to do to keep their run going here?
Obviously, you have to not let Darrell Turner run 4 touchdowns and 200-something yards.
Sure.
But and really, I keep emphasizing that defense, and I'm going to keep doing it now. Anderson, their success, not to say their defense hasn't been great, their success has been because of Justice Burnham. At least, the scoreboard success that we've seen and how far ahead from teams they are on a weekly basis. If you can get some sacks early, if you can force a turnover, if you can make him as uncomfortable as humanly possible, then you can squeeze out a close one. But that is the best shot you have against Anderson because, we've shown probably 20 times on the final quarter, Anderson likes to bang the drum after you score a touchdown.
Yes.
We might as well just show, we have probably 5 minutes of video sitting in this station of Justice Burnham banging that drum this year. So if you can keep him from doing that, especially early, cause some tempo issues that they have to work back into at the second half, that's where your success is.
Okay. And Obviously, this is going to be another great one. And our own Reagan Holgate did catch up with LaSalle heading into this game, kind of getting an idea of how the players are feeling. So let's take a listen to what they have to say.
We were a young team for 2 years. Coming into this season, we had a lot of potential. So to show everybody that we can play, it's been great. And I feel like on Friday night we're going to go out there, dominate, keep playing the way we've been playing. And I feel like we clicked at the right time. Our offense, defense, special teams, all three phases have been clicking. So we're ready for Friday night to go out there and hopefully keep on playing.
Well, we'll want to see how that game shakes out for them. But let's move on to one more Ohio game before we highlight the other states in our area. We got a very solid team, Taft Senators, and going up against Alter, who's been on a bit of a run leading into the playoffs here.
Yeah. So we'll start with Taft. I went to a game very early on in the season to the Senators. Matter of fact, I was on the sideline for all of 10 minutes because it was like a quick grab 45 seconds. In that time, I saw a fumble, I saw a long touchdown, and then I got the left side of my body blown up because they were running to celebrate the touchdown, and I was in the firing line. So I know they hit hard. But they've been consistently great all year, 11-2. You don't get to there on accident. Last week they beat Indian Hill 30-14. Week prior they beat Brookville 44-0. Just consistently great. Monsanto Torbert's had a really good year, their quarterback. But like you mentioned, Alter, it's been a little bit more of a wild ride for them. They're 8-5. They're coming off of a 37-13 win against Taylor last week. This one really, really shocked me because I hang out down there when Final Quarter's happening. I did not know the final of this until I saw the highlights. They beat Wyoming 42-0, and that has been a really, really good team just throughout the year. So it's kind of that magic, but this is another one that we got to see earlier in the year, just not particularly close like that St. X Muller game was. Alter lost to Taft 36-7 in week 3.
Okay.
So, is it a tough look? Yeah, but this is not the same Alter team, that walked into that game earlier this year, and it's not the same Taft team either. They've grown, they've improved, they've impressed, and all the chips are on the table here. So, yeah.
Do you think that Alter has seen the players grow enough to, close that gap that they had?
If I were to predict who's going to win this game, I would take Taft. Just because on that consistency, I do worry a little bit about that late season growth, how sustainable sometimes that is. How it can be lightning in a bottle. We've seen the bottom fall out for teams, at every single level when it's that late season push, and it's like, okay, well, we've run back into a team that we know looked really, really good against us earlier this year, and then you kind of start to regress and lose some of that. But if what we've been seeing recently is what I'm to believe is this team, I think that they've done a really good job to where it's certainly not going to be a 29-point loss. I think we're looking more in that one score range, maybe even like a really close at the end heartbreak fashion kind of thing for one team or the other.
Okay. Who are you guys to watch out for?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and start with Taft, because I'd already mentioned Monsanto Torbert, but we've got two running backs and then a third running back that's also a linebacker. Robert Kelly, Najaya Hill, and then running back Aaron Dowdle Jr. Last week, he had 80 rush yards, a touchdown, 11 tackles, and a pick 6. So,
pretty solid number.
Yeah, you want to make an impact on the game, that's how you do it. Yeah. So, Aaron Dowdle coming off that big week, and then Bryce Brewster, I would argue this was their MVP of last week, 3.5 sacks. Yes. You get it a quarterback that many times, and it's going to be extremely difficult, no matter what the circumstances is, to win that game.
Yeah, and especially just once you get like 2, maybe 3 sacks, then it's mental too.
Yeah, you become skittish. You know that Bryce Brewster is sitting there on that end trying to take your head off. He's almost successfully done it twice at this point, and then he goes on to get another 1.5 for the rest of the game. It's so much of a mental game, especially when you're a defensive lineman, and double especially when you're a quarterback. When you're impacting the game like that, those 3.5 sacks really account for probably 15 or 16 plays where they either decide, you know what, we're going to run this because we don't trust that he's not going to get through, or I have to try to get this ball out as quick as humanly possible to keep him from getting to me. So that impact spans just so wide across the game. But on the other side for the Alternites, we've got running back Drew Cripps, running back / quarterback Noah Jones, listed as a running back, but has all their pass attempts. They just don't happen to do that very often. 4 touchdowns this postseason for Noah. And then on defense, I've got 3 guys I want to highlight. Linebacker Connor Watkins, who's got 123 tackles this year. Linebacker Wyatt Refschneider, who's got 114 tackles this year. And then John Kiley, who's got a pick this postseason rather, and 3 on the year. So
very nice.
2 dudes who are getting after the ball like crazy. They're going to be able to bring you down. And then 1 dude that if you pop it up in the air, he's going to be able to take it back.
Yeah, no, he's watching to protect that air.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Well, that wraps up the
Ohio
roundup for now.
Yeah.
Let's move across the river to Kentucky. Mm-hmm. We got Central Hardin playing Ryle.
Yeah.
A little. We kind of talked about this, where this is still an interesting matchup, just because you have it feels so late in the season.
Yes.
We're a week away from Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana is a week away from the state championships. They're still early on in playoffs, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, and we talk a lot about, and I don't know necessarily that we make a point to emphasize, because it doesn't necessarily feel like a high school playoff game with a lot of these ones that we talk about. Mm-hmm. It does have this large, grand scale competition aspect to it. This one very much feels like a high school playoff game to me.
Yeah.
Ryle, 10-2, very good year, very impressive. Central Hardin, 4-8. But they've had an impressive run through recently. They lost their opening 6, but they beat McCracken County 45-28 last week. That was at least a 6-5 team. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of meat on the bones to that. And then they beat Christian County, who had 1 win this year, 34-6 2 weeks ago. So to open the playoffs. Truth be told, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on Central Hardin, because I do think that this is a setup situation for Ryle to just advance. And also selfishly, it features on here because it's where I'm going to be. And for example, Cooper and Highlands, if they both win this week, they play. And that's our de facto #1 game on the podcast immediately if that's what happens. So I wanted to give those guys a break because I know what we could be getting to here. There's a handful of other, very talented teams in Kentucky that should be mentioned as well. But I got a feeling that we'll continue to see them as well. Ryle, though, like I said, going to be there. Going to be my first game seeing them live. And there's a handful of guys out there that I'm really excited to put some eyeballs on.
Yeah, we've mentioned them a couple times now, and they do seem like a good, solid team to be to follow and be like, this is probably going to go well.
It's hard to go to a Ryle game and leave upset. You know what I mean? You're going to get some good football. You're going to get some fun time. Nathan Verax, their quarterback, a large reason for that. Over 1,800 pass yards, 500 rush yards, 28 total touchdowns. Can't really ask for much more than that. Running back Jacob Savage had a great week last week, 134 yards and 3 touchdowns. Receiver Landon Lorms, he's got 8 scores on the year, about 630 yards. And then Bo Gay, last week we talked about the sacks with Bryce Brewster earlier. Bo Gay had 2 last week, 8 on the year. So, it's right. It's just a consistent across the base, kind of like LaSalle, to be perfectly honest with you. Very similar numbers across, just the team as a whole there. Yeah. I would argue, though, that Jacob Savage is kind of the difference maker for this team, and I expect that to kind of stay the same here.
All right. So, obviously get that run game going. Mm-hmm. If you can supplement it with some pass, it'll be good. But
to be honest, I don't even know that you'll need it. Yeah. Not to insult Central Hardin. I'm sure that they've got a great group of kids and athletes and things of that nature. But you are kind of running into a buzzsaw at this point in the playoffs. You're not going to see very many teams that aren't really, really good. And if you lose your opening 6 games, I think it's kind of hard to sell yourself on being up to par with what you're going up against.
So it's up to them
to
prove you wrong.
Exactly. I've been proven. Hey, listen, this podcast, this is episode 4. I think the first 2 episodes, teams proved me wrong, and went out of their way. And that's, if I'm not showing you an immense amount of love on this podcast, that should be your goal. I want you, if you see me on the sidelines at one of these games, be like, hey, I heard you say that, Central Hardin wasn't going to be in this fight. Look where we're at. Look how we're doing.
Heard you talking.
Exactly. Let me be bulletin board material. If that's the purpose I serve to you, by all means.
Put us on a loop in the screen in the locker room. It's great.
Yeah, maybe put who's a Rod Wave? Maybe put some Rod Wave music behind it to really kind of make that mixtape kind of vibe to it. That was the first musical artist that I thought of that might be mixtape music.
Yeah, that was an insane pull.
For you. Yeah, there you go. But yeah, so obviously I'll be at that one. I'll have highlights for you on final quarter. And then we are down to our last regional Indiana team still hanging around, but we've only got 2 more weeks to go.
Yeah, hanging around in semi-state. We got Batesville playing Heritage Hills.
Yeah. So Batesville, I had the pleasure of going out there to watch them against Lawrenceburg 2 weeks ago now. I didn't know a whole lot about Batesville going into that game. I walked in, I was pleasantly surprised. I think they have a couple really impressive pieces, and that starts with our quarterback, Will Gile.
Yeah.
So the reason that he stuck in my mind was because he wears the Patrick Mahomes / Dylan Raiola fit.
Oh yeah.
He's got the sleeve and and the whole get up. But he looked really good. It wasn't a situation where it was me or you going out there dressed like Patrick Mahomes for Halloween.
Definitely not me.
Exactly. Yeah. It wasn't. He brought his play up to par with what I was seeing there. I believe I have some numbers here for you. Yeah, he commands that offense. The running back Gage Pullman's over 1,200 yards, and he looked pretty impressive from what I remember. I don't remember seeing Damian Dance, but he was listed pretty highly on their stats total. He's wide receiver. And then on defense, Alex Kreckler. I had to keep double checking this number just because it seems high, but I guess it's right. 7 picks this year. Yeah, so you get 12 games in. Yeah. Over half of your games, you have an interception. I think that's a pretty all right year.
I'll take it. If I was a coach, I'd take that from a player. That'd be good.
I think it's a good year, but I know quarterbacks need to stop throwing at them.
Yeah,
that's the caveat there.
Make them work for it.
Yeah. And then, just as a formality, since I've run through this with every other team, Batesville beat Tri-West Hendricks 41-37 last week, beat Lawrenceburg 21-7 2 weeks ago, beat Franklin County 28-21 3 weeks ago, and then Heritage Hills coming off of a 50-7 North Harrison win last week.
Okay.
Yeah. So in totality, a lot of good games. I know that those Ohio games, especially being all local, some of those rivalry aspects, it's going to be a devastating week for a lot of teams, but it's also going to be maybe the most impressive week of your year for a handful.
Absolutely, and I think this is always a spot where even if a team does fall out, you gotta be proud of yourself for getting as far as you can.
Exactly. Not everybody gets to be a state champion.
No, you can only have one.
Exactly. So it might hurt to not be that one, but
for sure,
to be where you're at right now is an immense accomplishment.
So, yeah. Best of luck to all the teams playing, all the young athletes going out there. We'll be keeping an eye on everything, and like you said, we can watch it in the final quarter.
Yep.
Friday nights. It's at 10:30. It'll be on
19.3. Yes, and and then because I don't know the TV lineup or what game will be in there.
Oh, I know what game will be in there.
What is it?
Purdue, Michigan State.
Oh, there you go.
And you don't want to watch that. Watch 19.3.
But once that game is over, make sure to stick around if you don't get to catch the 19.3 one, because we will have a little bit of news and a whole lot of football directly after.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So cool.
And speaking of games on 19.1, coming up this Saturday, we've got. I guess this is arguably at this point the second biggest Big Ten game of the year.
Yeah. Because
the biggest was Ohio State, Oregon. And now you have Ohio State playing undefeated Indiana.
Yes.
An undefeated Indiana team that is 5th in the college football playoff rankings, behind Penn State, Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon. The 4th of 4 Big Ten teams. And it's still being debated whether or not they should be in the playoffs.
Insanity.
It's kind of crazy. If you so the fun thing about being a Purdue fan is that
there's fun things to being a Purdue fan.
Yeah, basketball. But I sometimes follow. I end up crossing paths with a lot of IU fans just online and things like that.
Right.
And there's a few different blogs that I'll follow that are more IU focused, just because I want to see what's going on for our rivals for when Purdue matches.
Right. It's a little scouting.
The amount of times that I see people saying like, "Oh, IU hasn't played anybody," it's like, no, that was okay when you maybe said it after the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Where the non-conference schedule was not the toughest.
No.
But now it's like they've played Nebraska, they've played and crushed Nebraska.
Yeah.
A Nebraska team that gave Ohio State trouble.
Mm-hmm.
They did very well against Northwestern. They did. I believe they played Washington a couple weeks ago. Did very well against that. Like they have been showing that they are playing at a very solid level. Like Curtis Rourke, the quarterback for the Hoosiers, transferred in from Ohio from Bobcats. 2,400 yards.
Yeah.
72% passing completion.
Yeah.
Like
he's been a great quarterback.
That is insane numbers. On the defensive side, Aiden Fisher, almost 100 tackles on the year so far.
Worth mentioning, he also has a game missed because it's like his thumbnail came off.
Yes. Was that in the middle of the Nebraska game that
he
left?
I know. I don't remember when it happened, but I know that he missed a week and then came back from Michigan State.
Yes. Correct.
But point being, we're only like 2 or 3 weeks removed from that, meaning there's probably still some issues with it.
But it hasn't looked like there's been issues.
Right.
You know?
But when you go up against Ohio State,
yes.
You might just start to see that a little bit more.
And I think that is a lot of the times, like for this Ohio State team, you going into this game, I think even more so than next week's game. You this is a game you just have to be locked in for.
Yes.
This is going to be noon on Saturday. You can watch it on Fox 19. This Ohio State team, I think, needs to shut down this offense fast and early.
Yeah.
If you even give them an inch, I think they're going to take a mile, and then you're going to be playing catch up, and the offense might be able to do it. But you need the defense to slow them down then afterwards.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Ohio State-Michigan game from 2 years ago, I believe. If you can prevent that catalyst from opening everything else up,
yes,
then you're still in it. But when Michigan found that catalyst, things started to separate.
Was that the year they just ran all over Ohio State?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe that was 2 years ago. It might have been last year. I don't know.
It was one of the last 2 years.
Right.
You're right.
Because it was JJ and Blake and Donnie, and it was
Yes.
the whole cast and crew from the national title. The questionably earned national title. There you go. Getting back in the Ohio State good graces because I've said Michigan so much. But, if Ohio State is in the Michigan role in that game, in a sense, here. If Indiana can plug that catalyst, this is going to be an ugly, close, nasty game. As soon as Ohio State finds that, opens everything up.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting that you mentioned that because this is weirdly a game where Ohio State is favored way more than I think they should be.
Yeah, because people are hating on Indiana.
Yes, absolutely.
For playing their conference schedule.
And for being a team of transfers because a lot of those players came with Kurt Cignetti from James Madison.
Yeah.
You have Curtis Rourke coming in. But as someone pointed out, this isn't when people talk about the transfer portal and arguably complain. I think you see a lot of times it's where it's like, oh, this player at Miami is going to Ole Miss because they want to have their playing time, or they will go from Ohio State to LSU, or they go from
these
moving
massive
across power conferences, and just kind of like this, we can kind of see who's going to offer a little more NIL or
who's going to give me that play time, or
and not even saying that's a bad thing. It's just the common complaint that gets brought up.
Yeah.
When you have guys like a Curtis Rourke who is playing in a G5 at a G5 school, doing really well, but sees an opportunity to take a step up into a Power 5 conference and help lead a team like the Hoosiers, who really have not seen any success for arguably decades.
Yeah.
And obviously they've beat Purdue plenty of times.
But if the largest spike on like your excitement meter as an IU football fan was the Michael Penix pylon dive,
yes,
I think that tells you a lot about where the state of the program has been.
Yes, and there was there were a couple years where there's a clothing company called Home Field Apparel. Their big thing was 9 Windiana.
Okay.
And it was because they're a bunch of IU grads, and people kind of stuck onto that, and that was the thing going into this year too, of 9 Windiana. And now they're at 10.
Yeah.
10 Windiana. They may be 11. They'll probably be 11.
Yeah.
Maybe 12.
You're right.
Who knows?
But 12 Windiana still kind of catches.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still good. Yeah.
11 Windiana is a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
12 Windiana, that flows.
That's money.
But you look at Ohio State and you look at this college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 right now.
Yes.
1 loss to the number 1 team.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, even with a loss today, or not? It's not today.
Right.
Saturday, in this game against IU, does Ohio State stay in the playoff rankings?
Yes.
Okay.
If the other way around, no.
No.
I don't. Indiana's not even a bubble team if they lose this game because of how national media and the polls and all of that ordeal is taking in their season.
Yes.
Which it's crazy to call the Big Ten a super conference. They call Big Ten and SEC the super conferences, and everything else is pretty much glorified G5 how they've looked at it, especially with the representation of the Big 12.
Oh, absolutely.
And of the ACC in the CFP standings. It is insane to me to call those super conferences and then turn around and be like, oh, your conference schedule wasn't tough enough.
Yes.
Neither one of these teams should be able to drop out of the playoff picture here.
And I think there's even a chance, even if IU they don't drop out, but lose a home field in that opening weekend.
Even if they don't drop out of the graphic, they become a placeholder, mm-hmm. which is just deeply unfortunate for how insanely successful this team has been this year.
Because I think what you'll end up, I think trying to dig into the psyche of the playoff committee, Indiana loses here.
Mm-hmm.
Let me bring up another thing I saw online today. Ohio State wins this game.
Yeah.
Do they sit starters in their rivalry week to get 10-2 because they'll probably still make the playoffs but not have to worry about the Big Ten championship and not have to risk injury against the Oregon team who has already clinched a spot?
I think second half you talk about it. Especially because I don't think that game's going to be all that close.
I think you talk about a second half if there is a 42-0 lead or something like that.
I go
because I don't think as much as that fan base wants a national championship from Ryan Day, mm-hmm. they want to win against Michigan more.
I think if you're up by 4 scores at half, if it's 28-0 or higher,
okay.
or 24-0 or higher, I think that's when you go, okay. And that's
give them a little break, let them rest.
And that is exclusively Will Howard, or JT Tuimoloau, or maybe Judkins, and you just leave Travion in.
Yeah. I was going to say let one of Judkins or Anderson play.
It is not a widespread backup O-lines in, backup running backs in. It is the guys that we cannot be in the playoffs without.
Yeah.
You guys find somewhere nice to sit. Otherwise, you're still out there because you see the logo on the other helmet, or you see the 3 bands that are running down it. You cannot.
Yeah.
It's college football. This is not the NFL. You do not have, the bye weeks are what they are, and I know a lot of NFL teams, at least in previous years, have bench guys going into the playoffs. Mm-hmm. You don't do that here. Yeah. You can't do that here.
No, I think a lot of people were kind of like, that's insane to even suggest, but I'm sure someone will suggest it in the moment.
Yeah, well, and that said, Ryan Day has to have playoff success to, I don't know that I want to say he's on the hot seat, but I know it's been a talking point for a really long time.
It's a warm seat, but it's because I think it's because fans are coming after him more so than the program just isn't performing like it should be.
But the Ohio State seat is always heated in some capacity. Like even when Urban was there.
You put a warning plate on it.
Right. Yeah. There's some. You're driving around in a new model vehicle. It's got the heated seats.
Yes.
It comes with the territory. But he shouldn't really be on the hot seat. But that said, if he were to kind of let that Michigan game get close and then have issues in the playoffs, it's hot. And so I think he has to protect that back half a little bit more, which is why I do think that there is a chance that he could look to trying to save some of his guys.
Yeah. And I think also if you kind of look at it, it's you get rid of Ryan Day, who fills in maybe Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
And I don't know if fans would even be happier with that.
You call Urban.
Oh, now you're really embracing your Ohio State fanhood.
No,
just call up Urban and bring him in.
But that's a real thing. Like he's on speed dial, man, and he's not a great dude, but he's a really good coach, and like that's hard to find.
I just don't think he's like as Bob Stoops did with Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Where they just brought him in, he's like, yeah, I'll come back for a game. Why not?
Didn't they? They brought Bob back for when Lincoln left.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a situation like that, but for a long-term job, I would not be totally shocked if they called him again if they got rid of Ryan.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, this is going to be a very good game. Honestly, probably.
It's the game to watch.
The game to watch.
Yeah.
And you can watch it right here on Fox 19.
Big noon.
So looking at where opening lines started, this is part of the thing where I went,
oh yeah.
Are we underestimating IU or overestimating Ohio State? They opened at 11.5 in favor of Ohio State.
Okay.
I'll tell you this. I checked it, I think, we're recording on Wednesday. I believe I looked at on it Tuesday. It had already moved up to 13.5 in favor of Ohio State. And I was like, that still feels scratchy.
Yeah, I don't love it, but I get it. You know what I mean? Because like with that kind of like I said, the catalyst. If things do pop off,
you could get two
there's
scores
the
ahead
issue. Right.
There you go. Yeah, I just this feels like a very dangerous game for people who are trying to bet.
Yeah, I don't advise you put money on it because I'm not a financial advisor. But if I'm especially emphasizing that for this weekend's games, leave your money away from Indiana, Ohio State.
Yeah.
It feels like a bad beat waiting to happen.
So looking at the advanced statistics, courtesy of College Football Graphs, College Football Insiders, Ohio State projected 24 points.
Okay.
IU projected 21.
Okay.
60% win chance for Ohio State, 40 for IU. I think that feels like a score that could happen.
Yeah.
24 to 21.
Yeah. I'd probably bump it up a little bit higher. You know, like more of like a 30 to 26, I guess would be the split there.
Or like a 31
27.
To
yeah, there you
something like that.
Because but either way, I trust that line a lot more than I trust 13.5 or 11.5.
That just both of those numbers felt.
I think you have to open with a touchdown there.
I should also mention the opening total 52.5.
Okay. All right. Well, that's not that far
feels
off.
More like
right.
what you're
expecting.
Yeah.
That one I am actually fairly in agreement with. But yeah, I don't know how you don't just open this with a touchdown difference and call it even.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with that.
Yeah, but I don't work in Vegas, so.
Jackson McCarty is setting the books for us today.
Yeah, I'm sure that'd go real well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't lose a bunch of money for my prospective employer at that.
But yeah, so that is a must-win for IU to get to the Big Ten Championship.
Yes, it is.
A must-win for Ohio State. Just to kind of keep, I think, to keep a high ranking.
Yeah.
To guarantee a home game for that first weekend of the playoffs. Because I do think a loss will move them down, but I just don't know to where exactly. It'll also probably affect Penn State.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's not like IU's just going to. It's not like they're going to move up Penn State and leave IU below them. I think you're just going to flip them around. So
yeah,
that'll be interesting to watch and then see how that plays out in the long run. Now to a game that does not have college football playoff
implications.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
But does have bowl implications,
yes.
And that is the UC Bearcats are heading to Manhattan, Kansas to play Kansas State.
Yeah.
That game is at 8 p.m. on Saturday. UC is 5-5 right now. They were 5-4 going into last week. Played an Iowa State team that really shut down the offense in a way that you just haven't seen UC get shut down.
No, and we have been a Brendan Sorsby appreciation podcast for the most part.
And it still will be today.
It absolutely will be, but we do have to talk about what happened.
Held to 66 yards passing, which is
Can't happen.
You don't want it. You can't have it.
Can't have it.
It's not the numbers you want to see. But arguably did make up for it by, I believe, putting in the best rushing performance of his of the year for him.
Yeah.
141 yards rushing. He led the team in rushing.
You take that.
And it was one of the runs was 41 for a touchdown.
So he got over 200 all-purpose.
Yeah. He was still performing
Right.
the way you want to see him perform.
It just wasn't how we're used to necessarily.
Yeah. And I think this UC team depends on that air game, that pass game enough that losing that like that did really cause some issues heading up against the Cyclones. This Kansas State team has had 2 losses, or had a couple of recent losses. That's Houston, which is one of the lower teams in the Big 12 right now. UC did beat them earlier this year. And then Arizona State, who UC did beat.
Yes,
right?
I believe so.
Double check me while I keep talking about Kansas State. Kansas State was on a run, was definitely favored to be a Big 12 championship contender, kind of with that Colorado, with Iowa State, with BYU.
They did beat Arizona State 24-14.
Okay, yeah. So
when Arizona held a ranking.
Yes, and and we'll be playing highlights right now because I know I have that game.
Yeah.
So that is so again, losses to 2 teams that UC has beat. Obviously, transitive property only exists in math, not in sports. But that is something that is hopeful at where this Kansas State team has been on a little bit of a decline. Line opened at 8.5 in favor of Kansas State. 52.5 points again for the total.
Okay.
Projections from College Football Graphs, College Football Insiders, about the same to that. 30 points for Kansas, about 25 for UC. So a little bit over that total, but closer to about a 5-point difference. 6 point difference.
The Big 12 is weird for me as far as like those numbers go because like I am still very much used to the 50 to 40, Big 12 games.
You want to see 90-point to 100-point games showing up.
Well, yeah, and to hear them suggest that both teams will add up to 50 and not just one is kind of a weird concept for me.
Yeah.
But when it's these 2 teams, you get it. Kleiman's defense is usually pretty up to snuff.
Yes.
UC has had their fair share of quality defensive showings this year. Not to take anything away from either offense. I think both offenses are very talented. But Sorsby, that does kind of worry me a little bit more. We know how talented he is, but it's now you got to get over the hump because that was a pretty crucial spot to have a not awesome game.
Yeah, I think the big thing will be either getting Corey Kiner to kind of carry some of that. I'm not saying Corey Kiner as like, he didn't show up in that game against Iowa State. He was still second in rushing, and you take out that touchdown run from Sorsby, and Sorsby has less than him.
Yeah.
But that is, that's just something to kind of help chip away, get that team moving, and hopefully bring home a win and get that bowl eligibility.
Yeah.
And then you face and I think also this isn't a must-win because they do still have TCU next week.
Yes.
TCU, again, another Big 12 team that has been struggling more consistently than like this Kansas State has been more declining. But so you still have another chance to make it to a bowl even if you don't win that game. So that'll be another interesting one to watch. Again, that is in Kansas, in Manhattan at 8 p.m. So now I just want to touch on 2 games real quick because we could go in depth on them and say a lot of nothing, arguably. I just think these are going to be fun games to watch. One of those is Louisville playing Pitt, an ACC matchup. I think both offenses have looked really fun this year. This is kind of like how you talk about of that old Big 12 of let's run up the score. I think this could honestly get into a bit of an offensive battle. Jeff Brom with the Cardinals has been.
Is Holstein back for Pitt? He was out
That's a good question.
He was out last week, right? I'll double check that while you run us through this.
Yeah, go for it. Louisville has one of the best, or has a top almost top 10 offensive estimated points added margin, almost 0.1 points per play, basically. Pitt has had a little bit more of some struggles. I think Louisville's favored. I think this is likely going to be a Cardinals win.
Yeah. Especially, so I did find it. Holstein, he was out last week against Clemson, he was a game time decision for that, so I struggle to imagine that he won't be good for this week. But, I guess if there's a setback, they haven't made an official announcement at point of recording.
Sure.
But, yeah, that's kind of what it looks like right now.
Yeah, and with this, Louisville playing this game and then facing Kentucky next week. And I think we'll go much more in depth for rivalry week, talking about a bunch of the different games and things like that. So that's just one I think you can watch out for on Saturday. One other one that I think is just a score to keep your eye on, to check on, once it's done, because it's not really anything in our area, but it is BGSU at Ball State.
Okay.
Bowling Green State is currently leading the MAC. Their last game is going to be against Miami.
Yep.
Winner of that game gets first place in the MAC. Loser gets third.
Oh, okay.
At this point in recording, Ohio and Toledo are yet to play. By the time this is out, they will have won. That decides who gets second, basically.
Okay, silver medal is up for grabs right there.
Yep.
And then it's a true win and you're in, but not only that, it's win and you are number one.
Yeah, and they still have to play the championship game against that number 2.
Of course.
But I do think it's a little bit interesting where it's like, well, you got to win this. Like this is down to it, because Miami did have that good, solid win against Northern Illinois. If you didn't see that field goal block to end the game, beautiful play by the Red Hawks, and just fun football.
Yeah. So Maction being back, I know it does not help us too much with this podcast and when we record.
Yes.
But there's nothing better. And I think this is 2 or 3 weeks in a row of us saying it.
Yeah.
But
and that game will be on a Saturday, so we will get to preview it. So
yes,
that'll
we
be
will.
fun.
It'll be great.
Miami Bowling Green one. So just another one to keep an eye out for, just to kind of keep what's going on. That's Brad's games to watch this week.
New segment.
Our
new segment alert.
I'm probably never going to keep again.
This whole podcast is just Brad and Jackson's games to watch.
Yeah, it's Brad and Jackson's segments. Segments they think of.
It's us spending an hour on the clock saying ridiculous things and talking football.
Hey man, I put a list of the guys I want to mention. I'm like, okay, yeah, so there's actually 2 guys to watch.
Yeah, literally.
So peel back the curtain a little bit there. But yeah, it's another great game, another great week of high school college football, and then it'll almost be over.
Yeah, don't say that to me, Brad. I don't want to get emotional in here.
Hey, we still got basketball.
We do.
We got basketball. We got spring sports. We're gonna have plenty of sports to keep covering.
Oh yeah.
All year round.
Oh yeah. There's not gonna be a shortage of content, that's for sure.
Yes.
It's just a shortage of my favorite sport.
Yes.
It is what it is.
My one true love.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
So as always, follow us along on social media. Follow the final quarter sports wraps in the morning. Our whole sports team: Gabby, Reagan, Joe, and Jeremy. All of them doing great work, and also Austin.
Yeah,
he's been
Austin Brisky.
He's been posting his the games that he's been going to. He was at those state final volleyball games a couple weeks ago, so you can follow that along on social media as well.
If we're doing final quarter shout-outs, I'll mention Noah Miller. I'll mention Jared Darwish, Rufus, Philip Krinsky. He's been doing incredible stuff with the drone all year. It's a really talented crew, and if you haven't been able to watch one, make sure you do that this Friday, because there's a lot of work that goes into that.
So be sure to tune in for that. And that's all for us for now. So be sure to follow wherever you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. And then the video version is on our website or on our YouTube. We should have a playlist up by now. But we will see you guys next week.
Yep. Have a goal.